Yesterday, Donald Trump said, quote, "I don't really have enough time to explain." That's what he said about his war. Doesn't have enough time to explain. Someone else did explain the current status of Donald Trump's war yesterday when Donald Trump didn't have the time to explain it. And it took exactly 5 minutes to fully assess the current status of Donald Trump's war. It happened at a congressional hearing. In the hearing, Congressman Seth Moulton of Massachusetts echoed a line that was by far the most important line and most memorable line delivered in a Senate hearing about war in our lifetimes. In 1971, long before he ever became a political candidate, John Kerry was an eloquent leader of the Vietnam veterans against the war, and he delivered the most riveting Senate testimony of that war to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee.
Each day, to facilitate the process by which the United States washes her hands of Vietnam, someone has to give up his life, so that the United States doesn't have to admit something that the entire world already knows, so that we can't say that we've made a mistake. Someone has to die so that President Nixon won't be, and these are his words, the first president to lose a war. And we are asking Americans to think about that. Because how do you ask a man to be the last man to die in Vietnam? How do you ask a man to be the last man to die for a mistake?
Congressman Seth Moulton echoed that line yesterday. Congressman Seth Moulton was born 7 years after John Kerry's testimony about the Vietnam War, testimony that helped end the Vietnam War and saved American lives and Vietnamese lives. Like John Kerry, Seth Moulton is a combat veteran, a former United States Marine in Seth Moulton's case. Congressman Moulton used every second of his 5 minutes yesterday questioning Admiral Brad Cooper in a way that left the Admiral repeatedly close to speechless. And in the middle of Seth Moulton's questioning, he asked the Admiral if he remembers General William Westmoreland. It is an unexplained reference in the middle of the questioning, but the Admiral knew that Seth Moulton was referring to the American military commander in Vietnam who told a long string of lies about the Vietnam War and how well it was going when the United States of America was, in fact, losing that war every single day of that war. It was Seth Moulton's way of saying, be careful, do not step into the model of lying that the American military commanders fell into during a war in Vietnam that they could not defend or explain and could never win. Watching congressional hearings can be frustrating these days, with Trump cabinet members thinking that they can just lie their way through those hearings and accuse senators and members of the House of lying when they are sitting there doing the lying for Donald Trump themselves. They can be maddening affairs to watch, but in his 5 minutes yesterday, Congressman Moulton delivered exactly what a congressional hearing at its best is designed to deliver to the American people: clarity. In this case, it was an honest and clear assessment of the war that Donald Trump just does not have time to explain.
Admiral Cooper, you keep using the term significantly degraded. Last summer, we were told that Iran's nuclear weapons program was obliterated. Can you clarify the distinction between obliterated and significantly degraded?
Congressman, again, I think appropriate to talk about anything regarding the Iranian nuclear program.
No, I'm not asking you to talk about the Iran nuclear program. I'm asking you to talk about English language. What's the difference between obliterated and significantly degraded? Are they the same?
Congressman, anything regarding the nuclear program.
I'm not asking you to talk about the nuclear program, Admiral. I'm asking you to answer a question that applies to a lot of things beyond the nuclear program. You've also said that their ballistic missile program was significantly degraded. What does that mean?
The specific numbers are best, as you know from your own.
But President Trump's own national security strategy, which he signed in December, 5 months ago, used the exact same phrase, significantly degraded. So if this was true back then, 5 months ago, then why did we start this war? Was he lying to us then?
Congressman, from a military perspective,
regarding Admiral, are you familiar with General Westmoreland?
I'm very familiar, Congressman.
He's well known for talking about body counts. Now, when I think about you in this war, I always think about how you always got up there and would say everything's going according to plan. So let me just ask, Admiral, where was closing the strait in the plan?
I'm happy to discuss the specific operational aspects.
But did you just not anticipate that? Did you not think that Iran could do that? Or was that part of the plan here?
Congressman,
for 250 years, the Navy has kept sea lanes open and free. Under every previous president, the Strait of Hormuz has been open. So why is it closed under your watch?
Congressman, I've traveled through the Strait of Hormuz probably 100 times. I'm intimately familiar with it as a combatant commander.
So why is it closed? If you're so familiar with it, did you not anticipate that Iran might
answer the question? If I may answer with respect, with all due respect. My responsibility as a combatant commander is to lay out all the options, present those to the Secretary and the President. They make policy-level decisions.
So you presented the
operational aspect.
So, Admiral, you presented the reality that Iran might close the strait to the President and the Secretary of Defense.
Anything that I discuss with respect to
okay, well, let's go back to the plan. Where was begging China for help opening the strait part of the plan?
So from a military perspective,
there are multiple reports now public that Iran has already reconstituted many of its bombed-out missile sites. Was that part of the plan, too?
Those reports are inaccurate.
Okay. I will actually give you credit for regime change. I know that was part of the plan. You've replaced an 86-year-old in failing health with a fatwa against producing nuclear weapons, with a more hardline guy in his 50s who, in case he wasn't hardline enough, you killed his immediate family. Was that part of the plan? Is that the regime change you wanted?
Congressman, we were given very specific military objectives to degrade Iran's power projection capability. That's exactly what we did.
Okay, so in the course of doing that, you also lifted the oil sanctions on Iran, giving them about $14 to $16 billion. They can buy a lot of ballistic missiles for that. Was that part of the plan? Lifting oil sanctions on them in the course of the conflict? They kill 14 Americans, we lift oil sanctions on them?
As you know, sir, the U.S. military does not lift sanctions. That's a policy decision.
Okay, I'm just trying to figure out where it was part of the plan. On March 5th, you talked about how you built the most integrated air missile defense or air defense system in the Middle East, and yet well into the war you had to ask Ukraine for help with defenses against drones.
That's not accurate.
Okay. What about oil prices, gas prices? Was oil prices going up 56% part of the plan?
Congressman, as you know, from a military perspective, we don't deal in oil and gas prices. I defer to the appropriate authorities within the government.
Okay, so since none of this seems to be part of the plan, what's the plan now? What's the plan now to actually win this war? Because it feels like we're losing. We don't have a nuclear deal. We don't have the strait open. The president has called for unconditional surrender. Is that part of the plan?
Congressman, we achieved all our military objectives. We're presently in a ceasefire. We're executing a blockade, and we're prepared for a broad range of contingencies.
Well, it doesn't seem to be going well, and I would like to know how many more Americans we have to ask to die for this mistake. Do you know?
I think it's an entirely inappropriate statement from you, sir.
With all due respect.
With all due respect.
It's not a statement, it's a question.
And that is how you do it. Senator Cory Booker will join us after this break.